Coming to you live on a weekly basis in the off season. It's the Believe in the Southside boys. I'm Steve-O. You can find me on Twitter at Drunk Shy Sox Fan. And joining me, as always, my beloved co-host, probably more beloved than myself, Carrie.
Steve, what's going on? I don't think I'm more beloved than you. I think I'm more hated than you on Twitter. But
Depends on who you ask.
Yeah, 100%. It depends on who you ask. But it's your boy, that baseball fan on Twitter. It's Carrie. I'm excited for this episode, Steve. You approached me with, should we have this guy on, for one of our guests? And it was an immediate yes. So I'll let you introduce our guest here.
Absolutely. I mean, this guy really needs no further introduction. He, on our old podcast, my old podcast, I should say, which I still do work with, the Sons of Honarchy, we called him our official, unofficial minor league correspondent. This is a guy that has done so much work in regard to covering prospects for our Chicago White Sox throughout the years. This is a guy that I've been talking to about the White Sox since the rebuild has been happening. This is a guy who lives right down in White Sox minor league country. It's the guy that's hosted me, gotten me very bourbon drunk, and let me sleep in the same bedroom that former White Sox minor leaguers have spent months in. Ladies and gentlemen, the one, the only, Dan Victor. Dan, how you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on, guys. I really appreciate it.
Hey, we appreciate you taking the time out of your day. It's another hour later for you than it is for us here in the Chicagoland area. You are in currently North Carolina, correct?
Correct. Asheville, North Carolina.
Asheville, North Carolina. And, you are a guy that, not only, follows the White Sox and follows this minor league system, but you are entrenched in this minor league system. Can you tell us a little bit more about your experience in not only covering the system, but also just being a part of it, actually?
Well, I came down to North Carolina. I used to work at a demolition company up there on the south side of Chicago, Brandenburg Industrial Services Company, right there on the south side. But they traveled me all over the country, tearing down big industrial buildings and whatnot. And I came down to North Carolina in 2015. And I don't know if you remember how bad the team was then, 2015, 2016, 2017.
Oh, yeah.
But, the only thing to look forward to at that point in time was the minor leaguers. So, and I was right there near Kannapolis where the low A team plays. And I started just paying attention to these guys that were coming through because I wanted to find the silver lining, when we had these 100-loss teams. And I was like, and also they were one of the few teams that did not have a MILB TV feed. So nobody knew who these guys were. Couldn't even see them on MILB TV if you were an avid fan. So I started just kind of live tweeting about them. And I noticed that some of the ball players' parents started following me. So I'd send them pictures of their kids and tell them how their kid looked on the field. And I ended up becoming friends with a whole bunch of minor league parents. And then I started writing about the kids, and my wife and I became boosters for the team, which that's a host family. We sponsored an apartment, so after the ball games, we take the kids out to dinner. We had a couple of the guys over at the house. It's been very rewarding, and it was fun to, help those guys because the conditions in the minor leagues are kind of shitty. They don't make a whole lot of money. They don't get, they're not exposed to the conditions that our major leaguers are exposed to. So, anything we can do to give them a support system when they're away from family and friends, we like to do. So we've been doing that since 2016.
That's incredible. And one thing, Dan, about this show that is, you've been with me before on Sons of Honarchy, but this is a little bit more of an interactive show where we like to, let the guests, that come in and watch us live comment, and we pop up their comments. There's some really funny comments so far about, you being in demolition here. the question, you moving from Chicago to North Carolina, are you in witness protection? Do you know? He's pleading the fifth. He's pleading the fifth. I love this. And apparently you may have inadvertently covered up bodies for Sammy Davis Jr.'s uncles in the unions. So this is already really good. You should add this on your resume.
Very good. Sounds great.
Well, another comment from Sammy Davis Jr. that I'm going to hop right into, because this is the focal point of our conversation today, and I know you probably strongly disagree with this comment. If he's talking about all our good prospects, then this should be a quick show. Dan, would you like to clap back at our guy Sammy Davis Jr. on that one?
He's not 100% wrong. This is a bottom third of the league farm system, and it's very top heavy. As far as what we have, after the top 30, it's kind of a throw darts at a name, at the names of all the guys in the system, and there's a whole bunch of interchangeable parts. And there's guys that can pop up, but as far as the top 10, I'd say that's pretty solid. We got some really interesting players.
1,000%. Yeah, and I like that you mentioned top heavy. And I think that's something to think about is especially when I started to really follow this farm system, I felt really good. Like when the Sox were in the top 3 in Major League Baseball in regard to their farm, I was excited about the guys in the late teens and the early 20s on the list, right? And now it's like I'm kind of like, who? Let me ask you this: of those top tier guys, then. So we got Colson Montgomery in particular, that's right up at the top. Tell me what you're seeing with Colson Montgomery, because from everything that's in my ear so far, it's like this dude's the truth.
He really is. The knock on him when he got drafted was that he was older for a high school senior, which is absurd when you think about it.
Doesn't make sense.
A high school senior, and he's 6-8 months older than other high school seniors. On a grand scale, what does that mean? If he moves along in the system quickly, he quickly will be under par age for the level in which he's playing. And that is exactly how he's moving along. He's younger than par at AA when he was in Birmingham. He was younger than par at high A when he was at Winston-Salem. And he has played extremely well. I was expecting him to be a slower burn prospect because he was not one of those perfect game showcase kids. He wasn't traveling the country playing in all the top tournaments. He was a high school baseball player in Indiana. I think he played on Team Indiana. But he wasn't one of those elite travel ball, play 110 games a year. He was a football player. He was a basketball player, a very good basketball player. So, but he was more like your typical, 3-sport high school athlete. And I thought it would be an adjustment for him, to deal with elite pitching. And I saw him the first series in Kannapolis last year, and he had amazing strike zone judgment, like beyond his years, and that's something you can't teach. And you see a lot of high school players, especially, they're used to obliterating guys that throw 80 miles an hour, but then all of a sudden you got guys from college that are 4 years older and they're throwing everything is 92, 93, some guys touching 98, top of the charts velo, and then they're throwing off speed that these guys have never seen before. And, a lot of guys are chasing that slider because it looks like a fastball out of the hand. And, Montgomery does not chase. He doesn't miss in the zone. And he's extremely, extremely mature. A lot of guys get buried in failure if you're a perfect game all-star, travel the country, you played in all these showcase events, and you've been rated top 10 in your draft class for a couple of years. Well, you're not used to failing, and then you get in the minors, and it's the great equalizer when you got these college kids from D1 schools throwing to you. They might have been not the best D1 guy, but he's still way better than anybody you ever faced in your high school, and they're blowing you out of the water. And these guys, they get buried in failure. They're dropping F-bombs, beating the bat on the back of the dugout wall, and they've never seen going 0 for 12 in a series with 6 or 7 strikeouts. They're used to hitting 500 with a couple bombs. And Colson takes things in stride, extremely mature, very professional. I think he was completely gassed at the end of the season, which sucked because, that's when he got moved up to Birmingham for Project Birmingham. It was good that, the way they had that rotation set up as far as their playing time, they had so many top prospects moved up that they didn't make them play every day, so he could get a little win. But yeah, he did extremely well, and he went from that first series. I told you he wasn't making great contact, and then like I saw him after he fractured his finger. He got hit on the pinky when it was like a swinging foul ball. It hit him off the pinky, and he missed like a couple weeks. And when he came back, he was like a house on fire, and he was barreling everything. So, yeah, I'm very impressed with Colson Montgomery. I don't think he's going to stick at shortstop long term.
I was just about to ask you that. We drafted him slotted at a shortstop, but you're not thinking long term he's playing there.
I don't think so. But that's not necessarily a bad thing. I said Bo Bichette wasn't going to stick at shortstop, and he's still hanging at shortstop. So maybe I'll be wrong on this one too.
Fair. Yeah, I mean, he's got a bigger build, if I'm not mistaken, right, Dan? Like, he's not like your prototypical, like, smaller, maybe shortstop that, that we've seen a lot in the league in the past.
Yeah, he's a tall kid.
Absolutely.
And I believe he was a very good basketball player too. So
he was a really good basketball player.
Yeah. So, I mean, sky's the limit, it sounds like, for this guy. And I'm really excited. Obviously he's still probably got, what are you thinking here, Dan? Probably 2 more years in the system.
Probably, yeah, 2 more years before he gets a shot. But who knows? I mean, he's got to develop some power. He's got the power, but, he's got to bring it to the game. He's got some raw, and he's going to have to, get it out in the game where he's going to hit 20 plus bombs in a year. And it's there, and he's going to get stronger too. It's there. I think it'll materialize more this season.
For sure. Well, I'm looking forward to watching his development, because from what we've seen off the jump, it's fantastic. It's good to think about maybe, toward the end there in Birmingham, he was just a little gassed, because it's long. It's a long, arduous season for him. Let's talk about a guy who's not as young and did not come from Indiana, and we'll probably see this year on the major league level, Oscar Colas. Tell me, yeah. Oh gosh, is Oscar Colas untradeable?
Nobody's ever untradeable.
Fair enough. There was apparently a comment that was made about Romy Gonzalez being untradeable, but
Colas, I had bad luck seeing Colas. When I would go see Winston, he was not in the lineup. Then when I went back and saw Winston, he had just moved up to Birmingham. So I didn't get any live looks at Colas. I just heard from his teammates, that they think he's legit. I talked to Andy Barquette, who is the White Sox minor league hitting coordinator, because I wrote a story about Coach in the offseason, and he says he's going to be an impact player in the big leagues, and I trust in Andy Barquette.
Fair. And here's the thing, even the projections, I saw his early Zips projections, and they're for a guy who's, he is older, don't get me wrong. It's not like we're calling up a 21-year-old rookie. He is older, but the numbers were eye-popping. This is a guy who's slated to hit above league average. Are you seeing that out of Oscar Colas this season, Dan? And let me ask even another question. Does he make the opening day roster, or do you think they kind of do a little service time manipulation despite his age?
I don't think they're going to do the service time manipulation because of his age and because of where they're at in the contention window. If they want to, if he doesn't completely faceplant and look overwhelmed in spring training, I think he'll crack the team and head up north with the guys, because he doesn't have a whole lot to prove. Charlotte isn't exactly a proving ground for hitters. He's going to obliterate that ballpark, and he could put up monster numbers for a month and then get called up, but I don't think it would be to anybody's benefit, really.
No, absolutely. And like, again, if we're talking about a 21-year-old and we're talking about service time manipulation, or a guy who, you know, hasn't proven it yet, then, like, for example, the Andrew Vaughn situation, right? I thought they called up Vaughn too early, but then again, they were like, okay, we're sold on him. Like, we think he's ready. Colas is 25 going on 26, if I'm not mistaken, right?
I think he's 24 pushing 25.
Oh, 24 pushing 25. Okay. Still, I mean, we're talking about, why would you have service time manipulation with a guy who's in his prime years technically as an athlete, right?
Exactly. And you know what he did last year? I mean, he came over to, full season baseball after, he was after the COVID year and all that, and he was kind of lightly played. He got used to this really long schedule. He got 3 different levels in the same season. Well, he's adjusting to, our culture is different. Our baseball culture is different. He's making all these adjustments, and he's just hitting and hitting and hitting all the way up, and he didn't slow down one step of the way. So I have to think he's ready.
For sure. What was that, Carrie? I lost you there.
I would hope so. Looking at it, he is going to be 25 in September. So I mean, at least he's got a while till he is 25. But to have service time manipulation for a guy like that when you need a right fielder as bad as you do, so that you don't have Gavin Sheets playing right field, I hope they don't play games.
Or Aloy in right field. And I gotta ask you about that, Dan. There's a lot of talk about Aloy still playing corner outfield. Is there something that says that he's going to be a viable option in corner outfield that I'm not seeing? Because I'm team Aloy to DH.
I love the bat. I think he's an impact player for sure. I thought he would be the Juan Soto of the American League when he got called up. He's been unfortunately kind of fragile. But I don't know about him sticking in the corner. But do you really want to relegate, early 20-year-old guys to full-time DH? But the game has also evolved with DHs in both leagues. So I don't know. It just seems unconventional to have such a young full-time DH, especially when he wants to play in the field.
For sure. And I kind of point to the Houston Astros, and I know it's a different situation, and they've got much more depth than the White Sox do. But think about Yordan Alvarez, right? This is a guy who was slotted. I mean, Eloy Jimenez is, his prospect ratings for, hitting and not so much power. They were pretty even in power, but like their hit tool, Eloy had a much better hit tool than Yordan. And I look at what Yordan Alvarez has developed into, and he's basically a full-time DH at this point. I mean, they're not, especially in crucial situations, they're not going to stick him in left field. And I think the White Sox got to start going down that path. And I know they haven't totally solidified the depth in the outfield. Andrew Benintendi is a solid signing, in my opinion. But yeah, why would you risk injury is where I'm at with Eloy when it's proven time and time again that keeping him on his feet and keeping him on the field is a detriment to his health.
I can't argue with you.
Fair. Gary,
I'm with you. I mean, it just makes zero sense. So keep him at DH. I don't care how old he is. I mean, when did Frank Thomas even start at DH? I think later in his 20s, I want to say, like later, like 28, 29, probably. I mean, I would rather have that bat in that lineup every single day than, for 120 games if he plays and gets hurt. So that's even pushing it. I think 120 is more than he's played.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that 1 year he had like 130 games played or something, right? That 2019. Yep. 2019. Speaking of guys who have been stuck in corner outfield that probably shouldn't be stuck in corner outfield, let's talk about the guy who you've gifted me with an autographed ball of him too, Dan. Still, sitting in my prized possessions right now, Sir Andrew Vaughn.
Ooh, that's cool.
A guy, yes, one of the best gifts I've ever gotten. So thank you, Dan. We're talking about a guy who in 21 had a below league average OPS, right? He's still a rookie, still figuring things out at the plate. He made a jump from single A ball, high A ball to the major leagues with nothing in between. Then we see a guy last year who, with, I mean, you could say there was lineup protection, but there really wasn't. Still hits above league average in regard to, weighted runs created or OPS plus. Do you see there was like a 20-point jump? I think he went from 91 to 111 in regard to OPS plus. Do you see that same kind of jump for Andrew Vaughn this season, Dan?
Yes, 100%. I'm on board with Andrew Vaughn breaking out in a huge way. I even tweeted something this offseason. I said I think he could go 300, 100 this year.
Ooh, I would love that.
This is the guy that, this is the guy we've been waiting for, and now he's playing his natural position. I mean, think about what they asked him to do. He skipped over AA, skipped over AAA, came up, after the COVID season. Then they stick him on-the-job training at the highest level, in right field. He's not an outfielder. And now he's going to be in a natural position. He's comfortable. He's got learning experience with a couple seasons under his belt. I think he's going to blow up and go off.
I love that. I'm glad that you feel that as well, because that I get the same feeling. I get the absolute same feeling. I mean, to see that progression last year, and now he doesn't have to play corner outfield. He's at his natural position, as you said. And there isn't that drama. Like, there was a little bit of drama in regard to where does Andrew Vaughn fit in this lineup? We know his fit now. And that's not to say that the White Sox still could have paid up for Jose Abreu to be, swapping off time, or that the money could have been spent elsewhere. But I really like this for Andrew Vaughn, and I think this is his time as well. Yeah, Carrie, I gotta go here. Who, Dan, do you think has, you said Andrew Vaughn having a big breakout year. Do you see anybody else having a huge breakout year for this White Sox team? Is it going to be Luis? Is it going to be Eloy? Is it going to be Yohan Moncada coming back and having a resurgence? Who do you see in this ball club really doing what they need to do?
I think they're all on. They all seem to be on board, at least in front of the media. They all seem to be on board on the Pedro Express. And I think that just that energy level, and plus the disappointment of last season, plus can we have this horrible injury luck 3 years in a row? That's beyond bad luck, what we experienced as Sox fans with the injuries the last 2 years. Can it happen 3 years in a row? I suppose it could, but I would have to say the odds are actually in their favor for the stars to align in a positive way rather than how they have aligned in a negative way for the last 2 years. So I think just guys performing to the level that we know they can perform, it's going to happen. I think Moncada is going to be greatly improved. I think Eloy is going to be better because he's going to play more this season. I don't think he's going to get. I can't predict injuries, but like I said, just the law of averages, I would hope that he can be on the field for 120 games this year. And the guys seem to have taken their conditioning seriously in the offseason. I think they got a chip on their shoulder after, national publications saying they're going to be a 500 team. If you look at that lineup and the pitching staff, the starting rotation, there's no way they should be a 500 team. It seems inconceivable to possibly have them be below 500 or a 500 team.
Gary, do you feel the same way?
Last week I said they were going to win 82, 83, 84. So technically I agree with Dan. They're not going to be a 500 team. They'll probably be a little bit better. I hope that Dan's correct here where we finally get a season with no injuries. Because if that does happen, right, that's what I take into account with all this. If there is no injuries, right, minor injuries, then you're looking at a team that can win 88 to 90 something games easily. With the talent they have on the team, I could not agree more. But, in recent years, we've seen guys play 50 games, 60 games, 70 games, 80 games, and it's tough to guarantee that they're not going to get hurt. So that's why I think a lot of people are more down on them than they are, more positive about them.
Absolutely.
The whole other topic.
For sure. I mean, one thing that we've done on this podcast is be extremely critical of Rick Hahn and how this offseason has gone so far, Dan. I mean, do you think that everything's good and there's enough talent on the field to, like, is there enough? Let me put it this way. Hahn said that they're in a window of contention. Is there enough talent on the field to contend, in your opinion?
I think so. I mean, they obviously don't spend like a lot of the other teams have spent. I mean, the Blue Jays look like they're going to be a juggernaut team. The Yankees always spend money. It's going to be hard to beat some teams, but I don't see them. I sound like such a homer, but man, I really think they're going to make the playoffs. I don't think there's going to be an issue there.
Okay. So division title or even fighting for a wild card spot. Do you see them right now? Like, Vegas odds have them at almost 2-1 to win the division. Are you saying, like, if you're a betting man, do you throw down on that? You're just like, oh yeah, White Sox win the title at like plus 190.
I would take the Sox. There's no juggernaut in their division.
Fair enough. But for a world championship, that's another conversation here, as our guy Brian is commenting here.
Just have to get to the playoffs first. Then hopefully everything works out.
You're right. 2019 Nationals, right? I mean, just get to the playoffs. Scratch, claw, bite your way to the playoffs and pray everything goes well. I was looking, Dan, you wrote an article and I know you do some work for Prospects 1500. And you wrote an article about your top ranked White Sox prospects. So I wanted to ask you, on that list, there's some, you did like tier 1 guys, which was just, Colas and Montgomery. And then your tier 2 guys, which were, a list of guys, below them. Of those tier 2 guys, do you see any of those tier 2 guys making an immediate, or making a significant impact for the 2023 Chicago White Sox?
Well, I think I'm trying to remember who my tier 2 guys were. I know I had Sosa, Ramos. Was Sean Burke in that group?
Sean Burke was in that group.
Okay. I wasn't sure what the cutoff was, but Sean Burke, I think, has a good chance of pitching in the big leagues this year. Fifth star seems to be kind of a current question mark. He's a really talented kid.
Okay.
And he throws hard. He's got good breaking stuff. That's another kid with the right attitude. He takes everything very seriously as far as his training and his maturity. He doesn't let the game eat him up when things are going bad. At least not. He might do it inwardly, but he's not going to act like a knucklehead and rip down the bat rack when he comes in. But yeah, I can definitely see him getting some big league time and hopefully performing well. I'm a big Sean Burke guy, and that's also another extremely talented White Sox minor league basketball player.
Really?
Yes, he tells me that he says he's pretty sure he could take Colson. So
okay,
and that
would be a fun one-on-one to watch.
Yeah. That'd be just great when you see 2 top prospects in the White Sox organization blow their ankles out playing pickup basketball. Also true.
Well, one guy in your tier 2, I do want to mention this one too, was I'm trying to remember his nick. I want to say is it Popeye, or right?
Rodriguez.
Jose Rodriguez, Popeye. So tell me what you think about Jose Rodriguez. He was actually your number 3. He was your top of your tier 2.
Dude, I could really make an argument for him being number 1. He's unbelievably talented with the bat. He's super twitchy athlete. He's very fast, very quick wrist, very quick hands. His only issue is he likes to swing the bat, and that's a lot of the it's a saying, amongst the Dominican ball players. They say that you got to hit your way to AAA and then walk into the major leagues. So they don't like to. They have to hit their way off the island. They don't like to take a lot of pitches because they want to show you what they can do with the bat. So he's very aggressive. And some of the swing decisions he makes are questionable, but he's got amazing bat to ball skills, low K rate, low walk rate, but he hits the all fields. He can barrel it up and hit it very hard. Loves to play baseball too. I mean, he's a real dirtbag. He loves to play ball. And I'm a huge Popeye Rodriguez fan.
It's good to hear. And as you can see, we lost Carey for a hot second, but we're gonna keep this train rolling. He said he texted me and he said he froze, but he'll be back on in a minute.
All right.
Before Carey got on, and even though he's off right now, I gotta ask again. We were talking a little bit about Noah Schultz. We're talking about a 19-year-old kid playing rookie ball so far. What are you seeing in Noah Schultz that maybe others are not, Dan?
I think Noah Schultz is going to be amazing. You
got a huge smile on your face while you're saying that, by the way. I just want people who listen to this after on the podcast airwaves, I want them to know that you said that with just a huge grin on your face.
When I talked to JJ Lally, who is the Sox area scout that signed Noah Schultz, you could tell just by his voice that he was doing cartwheels over being able to get Noah Schultz. He had a super strong Vanderbilt commitment. They weren't sure what it was going to take money-wise to sign him. They were comparing him to some college arms that they thought would maybe be – they liked these college arms, but last year was a bad year for college pitching because a lot of the top guys blew their elbows out. There was a whole bunch of guys that had Tommy John surgery.
Yep.
So they were comparing them to guys that they thought like profiled as number 3 or number 4 starters, and they said – and JJ told me flat out, he thinks that in a handful of years that Noah Schultz could be a homegrown face of the rotation. And he told me that in his peak, he can see him developing 3 70 grade pitches. And that's just the kind of stuff that Hall of Famers are made of.
Yep, absolutely. I mean, when you say homegrown face of the rotation, I mean, the first person that comes to mind, and maybe it's his build, but it's Chris Sale, right? I mean, are you saying that's a ceiling, right? I mean,
he gets a ton of Chris Sale and Randy Johnson comps because of the build, the height,
the lefty,
because of the lefty. He's got that low 3/4 delivery. But I talked to his pitching coach that's been training him since he was 14 years old, and his coach loves him. And this isn't like I was telling you before we even got on. His coach isn't just, the Oswego high school coach or something that, wagons to future major leaguer that got drafted from his program. This guy worked for Tom House. His name's Mark Sheehan. He worked for Tom House for 12 years. Tom House is the guy who, opened the door and helped Randy Johnson become the big unit. He's the guy who helped Nolan Ryan figure out how to throw strikes when he switched from the Mets to the Angels. Coach Sheehan is like a biomechanics expert. He knows a lot about. He emphasizes arm health, and I talked to Noah's father as well, and he said that they really had great trust in Coach Sheehan and the way that he developed him, and he said that he always put his long-term development and health above all else. And I don't think we're getting some kid that threw 140 pitches in a high school game that's going to blow out, his first start in the, AA or something. I think that just so many positive signs. Now, mind you, if you read Sports Illustrated, Tom Verducci wrote an article about 6 or 7 years ago about how bad high school pitchers perform when used first round capital on them. I mean, it's a huge failure rate for high school pitchers. But I think that Schultz is the kind of guy that can buck these odds.
All right. That's great to hear, especially, White Sox used the 26th overall pick on this guy, right? So, fingers crossed, all the best. And, it's fantastic to hear that the ceiling is very high for this guy.
That's very, very high ceiling.
Most definitely. One quick question I had for you, and I know it's just because of things that I've heard about him and how the White Sox are really bought into him, but he was a little bit lower on your list in your tier 3. What was Norge Vera? I wanted to ask you what you've seen, because there's a guy that Carrie and I both know, Alex Rude, and he has some unnamed people in the White Sox organization that he stays in connection with, and I've always mentioned, I was like, Norge Vera, put him on the trade block, package him up with something. He's like, Norge Vera is going nowhere. What do you see in Norge Vera? What's the disconnect? I mean, I know you've even got Matthew Thompson on your list higher than him. So I was curious to see what you saw in him versus, what's still got to be worked on.
I saw two Norge Veras. All right. When he came up, when he came up to Kannapolis from the complex, he came in and he was throwing effortless 97, and he touched 100. He was throwing, it was effortless too. It looked, it was silky smooth. And I'm like, wow, this guy is a real deal. And then I remember I watched a handful of his starts, and I was like, wow, man, this kid he's going to be something else. He's hell on wheels. And they didn't really touch him at low A, but they babied him. His workload was ridiculously light. They were trying to make sure that they kept him healthy. He never went more than 4 innings. I think he might have went 4.2 once. But I think every start was like 3 innings, 50 pitches, and he was pretty much done for the day. And I hated it because a lot of times when they would yank him, it was gut check time. He's, it's the 3rd inning. He's got 1 out. He's got 2 guys on base. And I'm like, I want to see him get through this guy and see if he can finish off the inning. But, obviously they're thinking long term, and they want to make it sure that he's contributing in the big leagues, not that he's blowing his arm out trying to finish the 4th inning in a meaningless low A game. But that drove me nuts, watching them yank him in pressure situations, when I was thinking this just would be good. Just let him have this one guy, bases jammed, 2 outs. Let's get through the inning. But when right before he moved up, all of a sudden that 97 dipped precipitously. He was throwing 91, 92, and it looked like he was laboring to get it that hard. And it was like, man, I don't know what's wrong with Vera, but I don't know. It could have been dead arm. He doesn't have a lot of innings pitched, in the minors and stuff. And but I was like, man, so I'm just, if we get the Vera that came to Kannapolis last year, throwing 97 free and easy with developing secondaries, I think, he'll move up the list significantly. But if we get the guy that, with the dead arm that was throwing 91, 92, well, then it makes him a lot more hittable.
Yeah, most definitely. That checks out. Moving on, I gotta ask you what I think is one of your favorite questions every time I've had you on a podcast. Who are your sleepers, Dan? Who are the guys that don't make lists? Who are the guys that you just have seen, that you see the world in, that nobody else, might not be seeing right now?
I wouldn't say that he's going to make the list for people, but I'm a huge, sorry, I dropped you.
Good.
I'm a big Jordan Sprinkle fan. He was their 4th round pick here, and Jordan Sprinkle, their scouts, they had 1st round follows on him, and then he kind of he regressed a little bit with the bat in his draft season. And because of that, he fell to the 4th round. I think the Sox were thrilled. This kid is the best defensive shortstop I've ever seen in the minor leagues. He is absurd. He's got range. He's got twitch. He's got speed. He's got a hose. He looks like a little Ozzie Smith.
Damn.
And he's super high energy. I mean, his uniform's dirty after the 1st inning because he's diving for balls in the hole. He's always high-fiving everybody, hugging all his teammates. He's just a super rah-rah team guy. And if his bat catches up to the glove, I think his glove and speed are going to get him to the big leagues. But if the bat catches up, that's what's going to determine what his ultimate ceiling is. But I think he's going to be good enough to play in the big leagues just with his bat and glove.
That's awesome. Jordan Sprinkles, where was he last year?
Kannapolis. He got to Kannapolis. He was last year.
Okay. Good deal. Gary, I've been asking all the questions. I'm gonna pass it over to you, by the way.
Yeah, I just had a few here, just about a couple guys, and one guy that comes to mind, and I don't know if I missed it when my internet decided to shit on me once again, is a guy that's been on. He's listed on some top 100 prospect lists, and sometimes he's not. So Brian Ramos, this guy seems pretty interesting to me. I mean, what's the deal with Brian Ramos?
He's a stud, and he got appreciably better last year. I mean, he took off out of the gates just like a house on fire. And, you know, he's a young kid. He was only, I think he was 20 last year. And,
yeah,
you know, when you get deep into a season and you're 20 years old, that, you know, you start to fade. So he faded toward the end, but yeah, man, his bat is legit. He's got some big juice in the bat, and he can play some defense at third. He played some second. He looked like the real deal when he was in Kannapolis, and he just got better last year.
Yeah, I'm looking at his stats too. It looks like he had a pretty damn good year. And, you know, I just, you know, when you see guys that are in some of the top hundreds and, you know, some that are out, it's always like, okay, so they're clearly, you know, on that cusp. And I'm sure when people graduate, you know, out of the farms, out of the top 100, he'll probably, you know, make his way into the top hundreds. But he was just someone, you know, possibly could be, you know, a big future piece for this team. He's only 20. So, and then my other question was just about another guy that is, you know, mentioned as a, you know, you can't trade him. And, you know, he's better than, you know, Norge Vera is Christian Mania. I've heard a lot about this guy, that he can throw absolute gas. Have you seen him play, and, you know, what's the outlook on him?
I've seen him play, and I've never seen him throw a huge fastball. I've seen, like, when he dominates, it always looked like the starts I've seen him pitch really well. He was dominating with a big curveball.
Oh, really?
Yeah, but I've heard people say that he can bring it. And but yeah, I remember him with putting a lot of 92s and 91s on my gun. But he's young as hell too. He was one of the youngest pitchers in AA when he got promoted to Project Birmingham. So, you know, he's going to get some arm strength just from maturity.
Yeah, and size as well. So he is currently listed on the minor league website as 6'2", 170. I can only imagine, as a 20-year-old, so I can only imagine, I'm just thinking about my body at 20 compared to where I'm at 28, and I'm not hitting the weight room, okay? Like, and I'm already kind of putting on some natural weight here. So,
but I do remember when Yermain was at High A, and Yermain was built like Yermain is currently built, and they had him listed at 175 pounds on the So Mania's weight is probably wrong, but you never know. Sometimes they're accurate, but a lot of times they're like, whoa, he's had a few biscuits since they put this on the team media guide, you know?
No, for sure. At 170 would be unreal. I think I'm clocking in still under 170. If that tells you anything. So I doubt he's that thin, especially at 6'2" and pumping heat, possibly. I don't know. Like you said, his fastball hasn't been the standout for him, but maybe he's still.
But I've read some of the national writers saying that, you know, he was throwing really hard when they saw him. But then again, like I said, some of the national writers might have seen Vera when the fastball was way down in the tank, like I told you, versus when he first got to Kannapolis as well. You know, it just depends on when you got to see these guys.
Most definitely. Well, Dan, first and foremost, I want to say thank you so much for giving us your time. I know this is, you know, 45 minutes ish that we're rolling here, and we usually do a half-hour podcast, but Carrie and I have agreed, you know, when we've got a very worthy guest, we are going to go well over half an hour. You know, we had Herb Lawrence on from formerly with 670 The Score, now with CHGO White Sox on last week. We've got you on this week, and hopefully we keep the worthy guest list rolling, and we don't have more, you know, Jordan Millers and beer garden gyms. Sorry, I got to throw my guys under the bus. But I do kind of want to cap off with this question, Dan, is, you know, everybody kind of wants everybody else's prediction of how the White Sox season is going to go. So I got to put you on the spot here. White Sox 2023, with their current roster construction, no trades, nothing in the woodwork right now. Spring training's right on the precipice. We're here. Spring training's happening and ball games are about to be played, exhibition games. Where do you see the 2023 White Sox going record-wise, into the division, into possibly playoffs, at least from the way you're making it sound?
I'm going 92-70.
I love the optimism.
I'm not – I've come across as very optimistic in this podcast, but I really think they could go 92-70, and it wouldn't be a stretch.
I think that's I need that. I need that energy in my life, Dan, because I'm surrounded by pessimists like Carrie over wrong direction, that direction all the time. No, I'm kidding. I'm kind of a pessimist as well. And I think it's just because I'm so here in Chicago, the sports media, the the way in which this team has conducted the offseason, that's what's in the forefront of our minds. But I'm glad that, you're giving us kind of a more rounded perspective here. And I'm guessing your optimism comes from the talent that's on the field, right?
That everyday lineup. I wish somebody could hit up Jay Kuda and ask him how many lineups last year featured the core at the same time. I don't imagine more than 20 games. And even if they were on the field at the same time, how many of them were hobbled up when they were on the field at the same time?
For sure. And think about the way the White Sox started the season, right? They started the season off pretty strong, at least the first half of April, right? They looked good. They looked
8-2 and then went on a 10-game losing streak, which they never recovered from.
Right. So it's weird to think about how the season started last year and how it crashed and burned so quickly. Do you think, and I got to throw this out here too, I know this wasn't in my questions that I threw you earlier, Dan, but put you on the spot a little bit. Do you think the manager change and the personnel, in regard to coaching in particular, is going to make a significant impact on this 2023 team?
I think so. He's younger. He's motivated. He wants to show the Sox what he's got. I think the players want to show him what they've got, and I understand a lot of people love Tony La Russa. He was the consummate manager of White Sox baseball in my lifetime. He's a Hall of Famer. But that when you criticize La Russa, you would always get he's forgotten more about baseball than you'll ever know. Well, maybe that's the problem. He's forgotten about baseball. He had low energy for a young team, and I think he'd high energy.
Most definitely. Yeah, and as much as I criticized Ricky Renteria, at least he brought the energy, right?
Dude, I'm in the vote for Pedro camp for sure.
Oh, vote! I love the Napoleon Dynamite reference there. Vote for Pedro. That's him as well as you have to think about the turnover of basically the entire staff outside of Daryl Boston, which I have my own problems with. But you have to think about how basically that entire staff turned over, including the training staff. Yeah. So I'm very excited to see where this team's going, despite I'm going to call it a subpar off season in regard to acquisitions. Let me ask you, Dan, if you're in Rick Hahn's shoes too, do you make more moves? Or you're probably handicapped a little bit by Jerry too, but.
Well, 100%. You can only make moves that he's going to allow you to spend the capital on. And he's not going to go bash his boss, the guy who signs his paycheck, and tell the media that, he was crippled by budget constraints. So, that's a tough job. But I think, they're going to play it by ear. They're going to hopefully get out in front early. And then when they get to the deadline, we'll see how serious they are. Because, they get to the deadline and they're buyers. We'll know for sure if they intend on pushing all their chips into the middle and going for it.
Absolutely.
Hope so.
Me too.
One last question. Elvis Andrus, you like the signing?
It doesn't move the needle for me. He brings a veteran presence and whatnot. But I don't know.
It is what it is, right?
Yeah. And but here's the thing. You're the prospects guy, right, Dan? And you've seen Romy play. You've seen Lenine play. Is Andrus at second base opening day the right move?
I would have to imagine that it's the move. But Lenine, I love Lenine, man. I'm a huge Lenine fan. And Romy, I got to tell you, when Romy got to low A, he just looked like an ordinary guy to me. Nothing was special about Romy. But, you know, one thing you can't see on Baseball Reference, one thing you can't see in the box scores is this guy's work ethic. He's an absolute friggin' lunatic. Romy works his ass off. Have you seen like his Instagram and see how jacked he is?
It's a big dude.
He works out like a demon. And he's another guy that's a great team guy. Everybody that I knew, you know, down here, they all love Romy. And he stayed in touch with them when he moved up. You know, a lot of times when guys move up, they're out of sight, out of mind. They don't really, you know, keep in touch. They're friends with your teammates, you know. And when you're not a teammate, they kind of discard you till they catch up with you again. But Romy, you know, I was having dinner one night with Curbelo and Destino and Evan Skaug, and Romy, I think, had just gotten called up to the big leagues, and he was FaceTiming those guys when we were out at dinner, and I thought that was really cool.
Oh no, that's amazing. Like that just proves to you like what kind of guy he is. So I can see why the comments of as Senor Sox is kind of mocking us here, untradeable, because those are apparently words that have been muttered in the front office regarding Romy. So and yeah, the work ethic is fantastic too, but ultimately too, you got to feel the ball club that's going to win, right? Yeah, our guy Brian here says too that lifetime OPS for Andrus is 87 OPS plus. Not great, but at the same time, I mean, I think moving, first off, I think the shift stuff is really going to help him. I mean, you have to think you basically have a second shortstop in your infield on an infield that struggled defensively last year. So that will be a nice addition, in my opinion. So.
Yeah. And I think with Elvis, it's like, I totally get what Brian's saying here. And I just think you needed that veteran presence just because you don't want too many unknown variables because you already have an Oscar Colas. And to be honest, a lot of the team is unknown because they're always hurt, right? So if you could have less unknowns, put a veteran in there that can field. And I know people say he has never played second before, but second's a whole lot easier than shortstop in the MLB. And Elvis did it pretty good. You know, he was pretty good shortstop fielding wise. So I think defensively it was the right move. Offensively, yeah, he's not the best, but he's going to have a pro veteran approach at the plate. So
in that lineup, they're not going to ask him to do much with the bat.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Like,
is a 9-hitter. That's fine.
Pressure is going to be off of Colas too, because you know we'll let him go in there and they're going to tell him, you know, learn, soak it up like a sponge. We're not relying on you to be our 3, 4, or 5 hitter. You're going to hit at the bottom of the order.
Mm-hmm.
You know, just learn and get better.
That's a great point. Well, I think that's perfect because our guy Brian here, who is a former guest here on the Believe in the Southside podcast, is hopping off. So we'll say our goodbyes. Dan, seriously, thank you again. I know I thanked you like 10 minutes ago, but thank you again for seriously giving us your time. I know it's getting late. It's 9:00 in your area, and you know, I'll say no more, but we really do appreciate it, and I'm very grateful that we've stayed in touch throughout these years. We've met in person, obviously, and I'm really hoping that I can get down to, you know, North Carolina again for some ball games to see some young talent.
You got to come down, and we'll have a great time. We can time it where you get to see the Hickory Crawdads, man. You got to see that stadium. That their fans are out of their minds crazy, and it is a fun experience.
Oh my gosh, I can't wait already. So.
Yeah, man. And of course, when we go see them and we're playing against Winston, you know, it's me and my wife versus the entire crowd. You know, it's people against us, and but we have a great time with their booster club is just out of their minds. They got all kinds of signs and chants, and they do when somebody strikes out, they count the steps to the dugout as the guys walking back. They hold up over and under cards for over or under 21, and it was pretty cool. You know, Danny Farquhar is walking, he comes out to the mound. They start singing Kumbaya when he's on the mound, and then when he starts walking back, they start doing the cadence like in the military, left, right, left, and Danny would stop and pause like in the middle of their chant and stare at him, and it's a good time, man. You got to see these guys.
Oh, that's hilarious. I got to check this out. As somebody that grew up a Rockford Ice Hogs fan, this sounds like right up my experience, because that's the Blackhawks affiliate in the AHL, and they're out in my hometown of Rockford, Illinois, and those games get a little wild too. So I can't wait. That sounds amazing. So, Dan, thank you again, man. Seriously, I really appreciate having you on. Carrie, any other final thoughts?
I was just going to say thanks, Dan. I mean, I love, talking White Sox, but sometimes it's nice to not talk about the actual White Sox, players that are on the MLB team, but good to talk about these prospects and some guys coming up. And, if we're going to talk to anybody, it's going to be you, Dan. I know you're out there. You watch these guys. I mean, you've housed these guys. So if there's anybody to talk to that's got the inside scoop on all these guys, it's you. So again, thank you so much for, hopping on with us. And, we'll definitely have you on again. I know that for sure.
Thanks, man. If anybody wants to inbox me about anything in the minor league question about anybody, feel free to do so at any time. I like engaging in back and forth and hearing what you guys think and sharing my thoughts as well. So please reach out.
Absolutely. Hit up our guy on Twitter in the DMs. That's at SlyDano70. So SLYDANNO 70. So Dan, thank you again. We can't thank you enough. We'll definitely stay in touch, and we're looking forward to having you on again in the future.
Thanks, guys.
Appreciate it, Dan. Everybody else, have a good night. Peace.